Hi! So today I want to show you how you can make a text selection help like this, as you would often see on Android devices or something like that, within the Godot game engine. Now by default Godot doesn't have an implementation for something like that, so I made my own implementation using a texture button. So let's take a look. So to start out with, we just have a normal empty scene with 3 line edits. Let's change the order. I set one of them to be aligned left, one of them to be aligned right, and one of them to be aligned center, just so we can test if everything works on the different settings. This is not going to be compatible for every possible setting in here, but for the most common ones it should be fine. Now I used a texture button here just so I have something to select outside of these, and some background. So, first of all, let's create a control node and add a texture button to it. Now this texture button we are gonna want, let's see, I made a little blip.png, but honestly you can use pretty much anything. You can even use the Godot icon. Let's use this for starters. Then let's make it a bit smaller, because I think like this is gonna be quite large. So let's say 0.5 and 0.5. That seems okay. Give it a bit of an offset. Let's see. Alright. Here, -16, that should be fine. Make it centered basically in the upper middle. Yeah, something like that. We can look at the details later. Now, let's give this control here. This is basically our caret 8. I'm not sure what these things are actually called. If anyone knows, write it in a comment. So this thing gets its own script. I think I already have a script called this, so I'm just making one with a number 2. So we can do this from scratch. So, a few important things. We are gonna want to be aware of what our button is, so onReady var button, give it the texture button. We want to know if that's selected right now, so let's keep track of that. You'll see in a moment what I'm using this for. And as you can see, this one caret 8 thing, as I'm using it, is supposed to be working for any line edits I have in my scene. You could technically just have a child for each line edit, but I felt it was a hassle to attach that to every single line edit, so instead I made one that works for all of them. It's not a big change, it's actually a bit simpler if you want to attach it manually, so just change it to your liking. So, to keep track of which line edit is currently selected, I'll just do a var line edit equals null. And we want to know what font it's using, var font equals null as well by default. So this font is technically dependent on what line edit is currently selected, since they can have different fonts and styles. So from here, let's create a ready function and make sure that our caret 8 here is hidden by default. Now I'm not gonna hide it in here, I want to be able to see it in the editor whenever I like, so I'm just adding button.hide in my ready method here, and it's going to hide this texture button by default. I only want to show that when I'm actually selecting a line edit, so it pops up in there. So I select this here, I want this to show up, and then when I deselect it, I want it to be gone. Now I don't really care about delta here, we're not doing any relative processing. Make this a bit bigger. Let's see, we need the focus owner. So var focus owner equals get focus owner. So this here is what our line edit is going to be whenever a line edit is selected. It's what the focus owner returns. Focus owner could be something other than a line edit. So to make sure it is what we want it to be, if focus owner is line edit, do our thing, otherwise just skip it. We don't care about buttons or anything like this. Right now we're only working with line edit. Technically you could adapt this to work with other text fields, but right now I only implemented this for line edits, so If you need it for something else, I could try to explain it later, or you can try to adapt it yourself. Now, if we do have a line edit, there are two cases here. The thing is, when I'm actually clicking the button, the little Godot icon in this case, or the little blip symbol we had before, I don't want this to stay selected. I want the text to stay selected, because that way our caret or cursor is actually going to be visible. So if I ever do click the texture button, I'm going to essentially just give back the focus owner to the line edit right away, and just keep track using selected that the button is currently supposed to be selected. So the options here really is if not selected, which is kind of the default case, and else. If the button is not selected, we can say line edit equals focus owner. That way, up here we are keeping track of what our line edit is, and it's going to be visible to everything. We can say button.show. This makes our texture button actually visible. And then we need to figure out where we want the button to be positioned. We want the button by default to be positioned right under the caret. Now, the caret or cursor is actually only calculated while rendering for its exact location, which means there is no function in Godot to figure out the exact location for it directly. So we have to do a bit of calculation ourselves to figure that out. So I'm gonna keep it here and go back out here for a moment and make some helper functions. Now, to figure out where we are going to position our Godot icon here, or our blip icon, or whatever it is we're using, there's a few things we want to account for. So one thing is, where is this thing located on the screen? The base point is basically up here. So we need to figure out where is this thing positioned, where's our text field in general positioned? Or more specifically, I suppose, where is the upper left corner of it positioned? But then from there, we don't have the entire location yet. We still have to figure out how far down from here is the text supposed to be? Where does the text actually end downwards? And how far right from there is our caret? Let's say it's positioned here. How far right is this actually positioned? So that's another thing we need to keep track of. And lastly, let's say we are in this mode here where it's centered. We also need to keep track of how much space is there between the beginning and the letter itself, or how much space is there between the top and the text itself. Because these can all depend on your alignment and stuff like that. So, how are we going to calculate all of these things? Let's take a look. So if we take a look at the script, here essentially, let's see, we have the line edit. I'm actually also going to call the font equals line edit dot get font line edit. Now the reason I do it this way, I specify the font based on its on the line edit type, is because I'm getting my font from a theme. If you don't get your font from a theme, there can be some other ways to get your font. So let's see. You can set a custom font here. And if we hover this, it tells us custom font/font. So that's another property you can use to access your font if this is what you used to put your font in. I'm using a theme, so that's what I'll be using. So now we want to call a function here, but this function doesn't exist yet. So let's create it. Let's start with the position of our caret within the text itself. So func get caret position in text. For this, we do need access to the font and the line edit itself. Let's make a few lines so this is a bit more centered. Caret position in characters. For this, we get line edit dot caret position. So this is a variable we have. We know how many characters into our string currently the caret is positioned. Then how much text is before the caret? Or rather, what text specifically is before the caret? Because different symbols have a different width. So an M is pretty wide, an I might be pretty thin. It depends on the font, of course. but so we need to know what text exactly is there. So we say .text, .substring, from position 0 to caret pos chars. Now we need to transform this into a pixel position. So caret pos in pixels is font.get string size of this thing. And so in these 3 steps, we know how far to the side our caret is positioned. There are actually a few details here we need to adjust later still, but roughly speaking, this is going to be fine. So we can just return this pixel version, and that is this function done. Now we need the other function, so we can actually calculate how far offset our text is on screen. So get text offset is what I'm calling it. I'm putting the little underscore in front of these because these are functions specific to this object itself. You're not supposed to call them from the outside. For this one, we are going to need the rectangle size. So rect size equals line edit dot rect size. Just making it a bit shorter by putting it into a variable. And the text size, font.getString size, line edit dot text. So this time we want the size of the entire text. Now, var offset. Let's start out with a vector 2.0, but we're going to be adjusting that a bit soon. Here it's where the alignment comes in. Depending on the alignment, we might have no space at all here, so we don't really need an offset on the x-axis. We might need quite a lot of offset for centered, or we might need almost everything offset here. So it depends a bit how far we want to go. I'm always going from the left, so this side is what we care about. But in some cases, we actually need to know how wide this is, because here we are starting from the end, right? The text is always going to be near the end. So we first need to go in this direction, and then start from there, and then go back to the caret position. So yeah, those are all things to stay aware of. So, alignment. Match line edit dot align. And now based on this alignment, we can position everything. If this is an align left node, then offset.x is equal to 0 for now. I'm going to change this a bit later to fine-tune it a bit more, but for starters, let's start with 0. So basically not changing it at all. In case this is a line edit align right, we want our offset on the x-axis to be rect size.x, so the end of our rectangle. We want the end point minus text size.x. So if there's some text here, we want to go from there over here. So it matches up to this point. And that should be fine for this one. Yes. And then there's the last case, which is a bit more complicated still, where we go for align center. I'm going to ignore align fill because I'm not actually sure how it positions things. So in align center, offset.x equals, and now we have, let's just draw another one of these. We have some text here in the middle. We want to see where's the middle of our entire thing. So we can go from here, and here is roughly the middle. And then we need to know where's the middle of the text, and then how wide is this. So we want half of this width and half of this width to find our position. So it's rect size.x over 2 minus text size.x over 2. Erase all that, don't need it anymore. Then we still want to do a y offset, so offset.y. Here we don't have an align, at least not for the ordinary line edit. So we can just say, we can just center it essentially. Rect size.y over 2 text size dot y over 2, the same as we would for line center here. We just treat this as a line center as well, because that's essentially how they work. If I drag this around a bit, you can see the text stays centered. And that should be fine. Now, of course, I want to return the offset. And we'll come back to this in a bit. So, now that we're back up here, let's say var caret position equals get caret position in text, and var offset equals line edit dot rect global position, because that part we haven't accounted for yet, the part from the corner of the entire screen to wherever the line edit starts, plus get text offset. Now, since we want to position our button and we can just move ourselves here since we are inside of the caret 8 control node, I can just say rect global position equals caret pos plus offset, and yeah, leave that part for now. And let's see if this part is working yet. Alright, that looks fine. Now there's a bit of an offset here still, but we're getting to that later. You can notice here it's not entirely aligned the same for these three fields. I'll show you how to fix that later, but for the most part it's pretty close to where we want it already. Now currently clicking this here is just gonna deselect everything and not do anything. So let's deal with this next. So, this is our else case here. If we want to press this button, if input.isAction just released, click, and for this I just went into the project settings and our input map and made a click event here, click device 0 left button, then selected equals false. So if we let go of the mouse button at any time, the button shouldn't be selected anymore. We need to do this because our texture button isn't going to give us an event here. It couldn't, since we will automatically deselect it. To select this in the first place, an easy thing we can do here is make an else case for this focus owner. So currently, if our focus owner isn't a line edit, we do nothing. So here we can just say if or elif focus owner is equivalent to our button, so this is the exact button that is our texture button child, then just say selected is equal to true now, and the line edit just gets focus again. So now let's just see, this should be fine for a start. Now if I go in here, and I press the button, you can see I can press the button, but it's still going to retain focus there. I can do whatever. If I click this button here, it doesn't retain focus. If I click this button, it does. Since as soon as it loses focus, I'm just giving the focus back. The only thing changing is the selected flag that's now set. So up here we're saying if this isn't selected, we do this stuff. Now we're saying if it is, we can adjust things a bit. So if we're not currently releasing this, say rect global position .x is get global mouse position .x. Now let's take a look at this. This is fairly visual, so we can see what's happening. So now I can drag this thing wherever my mouse goes, and it should be fine. If I let go of it, it jumps back to where it was. So now we need to actually update the caret position relative to this. So let's calculate the offset again. Var offset equals line edit dot rect global position dot x plus get text offset dot x. So first we want, of course, the offset again of our line edit. So let's say var offset equals line edit dot rect global position dot x plus get text offset dot x, and then we want to see what the distance essentially is from our current x position. So let's call that var rel(x) and say rect global position dot x minus offset. Now we essentially need to figure out how many characters are there before the position we are currently at. If we take a look at the way text fields are handled in Godot, if I click on a character, the caret is placed behind that. Even if I press here at the end, it doesn't matter. It doesn't go to the nearest position, it always goes before. I'm gonna be applying the same logic to this, so it's consistent with how Godot already handles the cursor position. So, what we gotta do here is we need to loop through all characters. For I in range of length of line edit. And yes, that does mean it's a bit computationally intensive, but as long as your text isn't awfully long, it shouldn't have any impact really. Just maybe don't do this on something with thousands of characters. Okay, so the length of the text plus 1, because we actually have one more caret position than we have text position. So if font.getString size line edit dot text dot substring from starting at 0 to whatever I currently is. So we get the substring, we start with an empty string. If that is the proper position, we stay there. If not, we go to 1 character, then 2, and so on, until we reach the end. Okay, we only want the x coordinate of this though, and we want to see is this less than our relative offset. So this is our position relative to the start of the text. This is how far into the text we are currently trying to place the caret. So we see, is this still less than that? If so, we move it there. So we can say line edit dot caret position equals I. As soon as we're not less than that anymore, it stops moving that and can essentially break out. So I guess we can say else break to make it slightly more efficient. It doesn't really matter though, this part could just as well be left out. Let's see if this part is working. So if I select this, there we go, it's positioning fine. I can do it on all of these. So at this point, the only thing we really need to take care of still is this little offset here that is centered perfectly here, set slightly to the right here, and set slightly to the left here. Now, I haven't found any way to easily get that from the currently used theme or something, because this offset isn't always going to be the same. Since I just haven't found a clean solution to this, I just opted for the easy option. Let's make an export variable. And now on the caret 8 here, we can tell it how many pixels and subpixels are technically allowed, since you can have subpixel positions, though usually I don't think they're gonna be necessary. And we can say move this by 5 pixels towards the center, I guess. And now, of course, we need to actually use this variable, which is why I said we are gonna come down here again later. Because here is the left case, so we do, instead of just 0, we say 0 plus custom left offset. And on right, we say this whole thing minus custom right offset. So it's always the offset how far it is from the side. That's why it's plus on one side and minus on the other. Let's see if that improves it. If the 5 is fine for our settings, this seems pretty centered to me. This seems pretty centered as well. And so does this. So now this is centered fine. Lastly, one more thing I did on the version you saw at the beginning is I added a global offset that is independent from our alignment. So that's just another export var custom offset. Just a basic vector 2, which allows you to adjust the position in case your image isn't entirely the same, or technically you don't even have to position the image centered up here like I have, since this offset allows you to move it wherever you want. In this case, I can just move it up on the y-axis a little bit. Let's say -20 maybe, because it was quite far down. But let's take a look, because we need to actually apply it in here. I can just go wherever I'm calculating to the offset here and say plus custom offset. And in the else case as well, here it's minus offset, so it's minus custom offset, and in this case we only care about the x position. And that should be fine, let's try it. Okay, now it's closer to the text, which I think is neater, and it moves the text cursor or caret around fine. And that's really all there is to it. A lot going on. Just a quick overview over the code. And this does work for different fonts and themes for the most part, as long as you don't go too crazy on custom settings about content margins and stuff like that. It should be fine. This will be all for today. Bye.